Maybe you could nod when we're ready. Very good. As I say, in a moment, the Reverend Rosalind Mariconda will present Mother Nature, our timely teacher. But first, let me provide a brief background on our speaker. Rosalind mentioned to me that she was blessed to study early on with some of the finest writers at the University of Toronto, where she completed a Master of Fine Arts in English language and literature. Rosalind then embarked upon a rich teaching career that concluded with actually herself studying unity philosophy and becoming a minister at the Ursuline College in Chatham 22 years ago. Her first ministry she refers to as baptism by fire for 5 long years. After that, she sold her home in Kingsville and took a 1-year personal sabbatical in a cottage on Lake Erie near Colchester, where she wrote, recovered, and rested, all new activities for her. After that, Rosalind's second ministry began with her installation just recently, this past November actually, 2020, as senior minister of the Unity of Rochester Hills, a congregation in Michigan. Full-time ministry richly blesses her days now. She now lives in bliss in an older home circa 1925 on Victoria Avenue in the city of Windsor. When not on Zoom speaking and teaching, she can be found in her hydrangea gardens, on meditative walks, or meeting friends by the river for a picnic lunch. Rosalind has 2 grown daughters. Her eldest daughter lives out west in Jasper, where she and her husband brought her first grandbaby to light 2 years ago, Maverick, who lives up to his name. The youngest daughter and her fiance postponed their September 20 wedding until this past July, and since have bought a beautiful home on the mountain in Hamilton, luckily just before the real estate went out of reach. Rosalind's newest mantra is, "I love my life." And the UUs of Olinda, who for well over 20 years have been part of her life, continue to play a role in her mantra, love of life. And now, Reverend Rosalind Mariconda, for our Mother's Day service, Mother Nature, our timely teacher. Rosalind.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Ray, for your coaching yesterday. And also a heartfelt thanks to Tony for her beautiful, beautiful selections, and also for the music which she plays. I have to say I choke up a little bit whenever I see Tony, because of course I loved her mom and dad as well. So I believe that Harriet and Walter are right here with us. This morning, it is just a joy and a privilege, friends and UU spiritual family, to be among you once more. Thank you. Thank you for having me. As a way of launching us into this morning, I have some good news. We must be making some progress with regard to the current situation on planet Earth with our health, when we can bring a modicum of humor to it, as evidenced in the following text, which I received this morning and share with you. It said, social distancing guidelines have been relaxed, and we can now have gatherings of up to 8 people without issues. But I don't even know 8 people without issues. Yay, there's our morning laugh. So I would like to begin on this Mother's Day by recognizing that we are making progress, and hopefully whatever issues may remain, we know together the following truth, that those of us on the path of being awake, aware, and accepting that transformation is always a choice. Embrace the potential for transformation. This potential in Mother Nature for transformation is what delights me about Mother Nature most. This message on Mother's Day is an invitation to each of you to join me in recognizing, in witnessing, and in celebrating all that Mother Nature is. It is in Mother Nature that we see the divine maternal energy expressing fully, freely, and somewhat consistently, as you'll hear later. Interestingly enough, I never planned to be a mother, and then somehow my subconscious must have been driving the bus when three women, none of whom is a mother in the traditional sense, have inspired me this morning to share with you. It is their vision of the Divine Mother that has inspired me. And as I contemplated the rhythms and patterns of Mother Earth, I was in awe of the unique interpretation of each of these women's gifts and messages about Mother Nature, evidenced in their artistic expression. How interesting it is to me, as I said, that none of them fits the worldly definition of a mother in terms of having brought children into the world. And perhaps your experience is similar to mine, that some of the best mothers in my life personally, and some of the mothers that I have witnessed being maternal, did not mother their own children. And so it is all of those women that we venerate and recognize this morning. So here they are. Here are the three women, and perhaps you'll recognize all of them. I know that one of them is new to me for this talk, and they are Rachel Carson, Elizabeth Everett, and Georgia O'Keeffe. I'm going to start with Miss Carson, who arguably is the first conservationist. She started ringing the alarm bell about what was happening to Mother Earth in the 1950s. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of her life by way of appreciating how dedicated, how consistent, and above all, how ferocious she really was in making the claim that we needed to wake up in the 50s to what was already evident to her then. Miss Carson was a marine biologist who in 1929, a time when this did not often happen, she earned a scholarship to complete her graduate studies in biology at Johns Hopkins University. The rest of her life became a tribute to the global environmental movement, which we now see as part of everyday life. Her most urgent request of governments, of society in general, and of the people in her own life was that we would regulate the forces of destruction that she could see were not going to end well for Mother Nature. In 1962, her novel, Silent Spring, rang the bell of warning in a very loud way. It was the bestseller. And as we look retrospectively at the message, we understand that there is still much to learn from Miss Carson's research and from her warning. She has informed what has come through me this morning by a beautiful passage from her work, which calls forth three attributes as I see them, three attributes of every powerful mother, human mother, and certainly these are three attributes of Mother Nature, which she highlights and which speak to us, I believe, even more loudly in 2021. She writes, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts." Strength. She goes on, "There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature." Healing. Sound like attributes we could use right now? Strength and healing. And she closes by saying, "The beauty of the earth gives us the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter." Surely this resonates with us on this Mother's Day as we lean into those attributes of strength, healing, and assurance. It turns out that Miss Carson's work influenced me most powerfully in the last little while as I held this message in prayer. However, I will just, before launching into where she led me, which was not a comfortable place for me, and that often happens for me as I listen to guidance. However, let me just share with you about the other two women and how they inform my appreciation of Mother Nature and her holding up to us the potential for transformation in any holy instant when we decide. As you know, very likely Georgia O'Keeffe brought the beauty of flowers into great focus during her career. Her manager, photographer, who eventually became her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, was responsible for a marketing campaign which ultimately rendered, frankly, Miss O'Keeffe very, very much feeling like a prisoner of her own work. As brilliant as the strategy was to attach some of Freud's innuendo, shall we say, onto her work, it became very troublesome for Miss O'Keeffe. And in 1939, at a New York exhibit of her work, she gave the following quick statement addressed at her fans of her florals. She said, "Still, in a way, nobody ever sees a flower, really. It is so small. We haven't time to see. It takes time for friendship, and it takes time to see a flower." She took a deep breath and then continued. She closed with this statement, "You know, each of you has hung your own association with flowers on my flowers, and you write about them as if I think and as if I see what you think and what you write about them. But I don't," she said. It's interesting to me that her very famous work, which I'm sure you can call to mind, very gargantuan white Jimson weed, She actually titled it White Flower Jimson Weed Number 1. In 2014, a short while ago, considering that she died more than 25 years ago at the age of 99, her work, this one work, brought the greatest price ever paid to date for a painting by a woman, and sold for $44.4 million at auction. So Miss O'Keeffe stands as a celebrator of the majesty of Mother Nature. It's interesting that later in her career, she abandoned the painting of flowers and focused on the red hills and other gifts of the New Mexico landscape where she lived most of her life. And so we celebrate with Georgia O'Keeffe and with Miss Carson the beauty of nature as our launch pad into looking at the rhythms and patterns of nature in a moment. But let me pay tribute to the last mother figure inspiring me, and that is Elizabeth Everett. If I had heard of Miss Everett before this message, I don't remember her. She was Winston Churchill's nanny. Winston Churchill had parents that were, I suppose, more common than we might know in his era. His mother was detached and really incapable of what we might think of as maternal qualities. And his father was very aloof, and Winston was sent away to boarding school very young. And it was Miss Everest who formed many of his values, his core beliefs, and he had admiration and affection for her his entire long life. When the family saw fit to release her from her duties, he appealed to them both to keep her on, and that plea fell on deaf ears, but Winston continued to support her, not just financially, and a picture of her sat on his night table until the day that he passed. And so from Rachel Carson's 3 attributes of Mother Nature, strength, healing, and assurance, I was called to something very unusual. Like I said, it was unexpected, and this often happens. I was looking in a prayer textbook for one of my my Wednesday night Power of Prayer groups, and the book is just simply called Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer. It's by author Greg Braden, and in his talking about how hurt, the experience of hurt, is a facet of hidden power that works when we pray. And guess what? Out of what seemed like the complete blue and wild blue yonder, he throws in the Mandelbrot Set. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but I know there are a few of you, at least in this congregation, who could talk about the Mandelbrot Set, and I'm not going to very much. Mostly because I follow the admonition of one of my other heroes, Jane Austen, who said, if you wish to write, and I think this is true about talking, if you wish to talk, make sure you speak of that which you know. And the Mandelbrot Set, as you know, is named for a man who first discovered, I suppose, something called fractals. I knew I was in trouble when I called my cousin, the physicist, the other day and said, hey, can you tell me something about fractals? I almost fell off my chair because he said, Actually, let me send you a website because I only took one course in it and I thought, oh no, what am I doing in these fractals? And I was tempted to run, but followed my guidance that there are no accidents in the universe. And so I learned a little bit about the fact that fractals are intricate patterns that recur, and guess where? In Mother Nature. And I thought, okay, well, I'm all right with that. Well, then it led me into how does life itself in nature and in us open up as a function of an illustration of these very intricate patterns. A single cell that emerges in a leaf, as a poem of the same name will say, it is that same pattern that emerges in the tree. Wow. Wow, Mandelbrot. And so from that, I was led into the idea of order in chaos, order within chaos. In Scientific American, I ran to look for what are the most simplistic definitions for me to comprehend and apply to my love of Mother Nature. And here's what I found as defining the words order and chaos. Perhaps you will hear in these simple definitions an invitation to apply them to not just what we love about Mother Nature, but also to apply them to how we might be applying them in our own life in this moment. Order, one definition is that order is the place you are when what you do works. I understand that. And how's it working? Chaos by contrast is the place you are when what you do does not work. Miss Carson started saying that what we were doing to Mother Nature 6 decades ago, folks, was already not working. I give thanks for what I call the current health situation on planet Earth, because it contains in it the wisdom of the ages to hit a pause button that has been long overdue. I read also in somewhere in Scientific American that chaos results, get this, I did not know this. My grade 13 math teacher who just got me through would be so pleased for me. Chaos results from the geometric operation of stretching. Yes, sound familiar? Spiritual growth equated with stretching, equated with some pain. Oh yeah, but we are on the path and we are willing and we are awake and we are aware. So if chaos results from the geometric operation of stretching, and if there is beyond the apparent random disorder in nature, some element of connectivity or continuity, we can't call it predictability because that gets us in trouble with the mathematicians. I figured that out. Still, it is true that in the mid 1980s, that is the 1980s, because I was in the 1880s for a while. In the mid 1880s, chaos became a booming topic. I wonder why. Some of you probably remember what happened, as I do, to some of my colleagues in the real estate market of 1981. And so in the 80s, chaos was seen as a way of looking at financial markets, at the evolution of the ecosystem, at meteorological phenomena, and even the movement of celestial bodies. It was then that chaos theory became the perfect mathematical tool to extract some order, not just from nature and from life as a whole, but more importantly, from understanding ourselves as expressions of the divine. I'm going to leave Mandelbrot and the chaos theory pretty quickly here. Let me just say that this is what I found that helped me understand how to apply this to my own spiritual growth. It says in Mandelbrot that chaos theory is based on two main ideas. One is that even complex systems contain an underlying order. I don't know about you, but right there, I want to stop and say, Alleluia. Alleluia. Even complex systems contain an underlying order. The second main idea that I was able to extrapolate and comprehend is that chaos theory is based on the second idea that in each system, there are small differences, small, for example, temperature variations that produce very divergent results. Well, what does this mean? It means, in general, that predicting long-term behavior of any system is impossible. Okay, so is anybody surprised, given what is going on in our world at this moment, that this would have been impossible? It's interesting, though, that the mathematicians write, still, chaos theory makes it possible to analyze this unpredictability from a strategic point of view. I love math people. You know what? At the college, I always hung around with them. I don't know exactly why. I think they balanced me, which brings me into my final point on chaos theory, which is that there is always a search for balance in any form of chaos. And I believe that we are at our best in our spiritual growth when we are seeking middle ground, whether about our own understanding, relationships, or whatever. Let me just say that the reason the Mandelbrot Set spoke to me about nature is because I read this statement in him. The reason why straight, easily measurable lines do not exist in nature. Wow, let's just take that in for a minute. Straight, easily measurable lines do not exist in nature. Guess why? It's our salvation and can be given in one word: because of resiliency. Wow. You know, I think of the Sanskrit word, which is the root word of the word prayer, and that word is palau. And in Sanskrit, it literally celebrates this resiliency because that Sanskrit root of the word prayer, palau, is defined as how wondrously I am made. How wondrously I am made. Yes, each of us is made to be resilient, to be capable, whether we believe it or not, of moving through any seemingly complex, impossible situation. Well, some of you know that in my training as a unity minister, something that differentiates, I suppose, unity philosophy from a lot of others is that we seek to take away something that is very pertinent, relevant, and enriching of our daily existence from what can be some very esoteric, abstract, and sometimes seemingly, frankly, woo-woo, you know, kind of like, well, what do I do with this stuff? And so near the end of my talk, I always like to revert to applying the rhythms of Mother Nature to how at least I live my life. It has taken a long time for me to stop hurrying. Mother Nature does not hurry. As you know, perhaps from some of the early talks that I was blessed to share with you at Olinda, that I had to dedicate effort and awareness to slowing down. And so Mother Nature never hurries, and Mother Nature has purpose in those fractals that underlie what is visible. And so we get to ask ourselves, how am I doing with my purpose? I suppose we are united in our purpose. We are one in our purpose when we remember that each of us is a brilliant expression of light, and that the light that we express is commensurate to our spiritual understanding. And so let me give these 5 practical steps which help me in slowing down, in copying the rhythm of Mother Nature, which is no rushing, and also in living life by purpose, on purpose. Here are my steps. Number 1, handle fear. Do not run from fear. Fear is a powerful teacher, and fear grows when it is not looked at. And so we are fearless in embracing fear, knowing that it leads to clarity of thought. However, we must be willing to fully embrace that emotion, which most of us have been conditioned to avoid. Avoidance of fear, we know, can lead not only to addiction, but it leads at the very least to repression, suppression, avoidance, and that keeps us from clarity of mind, heart, and spirit. So number 1, handle the fear. The only way I know to handle fear is to allow it to be fully felt, because it is only then that it dissipates. Number 2, believe that you have the ability to work through what look like complex systems, even if you don't see it at the moment. Believe that you have what it takes, your ability to work through the complexity, even though in this moment you don't see how. You know what, folks? In the olden days, we called this faith. Most often, I call it trust. If I'm an expression of the divine, then how can I lose trusting that I do have the ability to work through even the most complex system? Number 3 or 4, or wherever we are, stop pretending that you have all the answers and admit that you need help. Recently, I would say in the last 10 or 15 years, vulnerability has gotten a much better rep. It used to be that vulnerability was equated with weakness. We now understand that true strength resides in true vulnerability. Ask for help. Those of us, I don't know how many of you might be in my club, but it took me a long time to realize what an overfunctioner I tend to be. In my overfunctioning, that's for another talk, but let me just say that those of us who overfunction have great difficulty in those 3 words, asking for help. So asking for help is a way to render self vulnerable, and vulnerability will give us strength. If for any reason you might be feeling some stress, this is number 4, then use that stress to intensify your focus. What's focus? intention. What's intention? It's where I lead my consciousness. Stress is a mask. Trust me on this. Stress is a mask for a deeper emotion seeking to be allowed to have its way. So we will use stress to intensify our focus. I left this one for last, not because I don't apply it to my life, but because I suppose in looking for a mentor that has handled pressure, what better teacher do we have than Mother Nature herself? So this last step it's applicable, it's relevant, and certainly to human beings. Some of you know that back in the 90s, I did some transformational training with Anthony Robbins. So certainly one of Anthony Robbins' teaching is to find somebody who has gone through what you are and do not reinvent the wheel. For our purposes this morning, in following the rhythms and patterns, the fractals of Mother Nature, then we notice how she handles pressure, and we use her as a mentor in doing the same. It is just such a joy for me to have been here today. I can only say that I have missed you, that I am grateful that I got to be here. And as we continue to be in what Dr. David Hawkins calls the 20% of humanity vibrating above the frequency of courage, Dr. David Hawkins first outlined the map of consciousness for us and the scale of emotions. He passed away in 2012, but not before he assured us that 20% of us on planet Earth, well, at least in 2012, 20% of us vibrating at an emotional frequency higher than courage, were enough to keep the planet in balance. And perhaps that is really where we are at this moment in history, is at a new opportunity for understanding that within chaos there is order. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I bless you. I love you. I behold the divinity in each of you.
Rosalind, thank you very much for this. We've missed you too.